There is no path that is laid out for you. There are just lots of paths that you could choose. And then sometimes the path that you're least skilled to do might execute better because you know you've got to be on your game. Realized is I was that person who was advising from a place of knowing in an area that was entirely new. If you get in the way of everything that you want, if you start to realize that, then you go, wow, that's the thing I'm in control of. I'm the slowest learner in this space. It's taken me 30 years to get here. I'd like to see you guys get there in 2, 3, 5 years.
You have to be intentional in the way that you lead. And you have to realize that every move you make has a material impact on a person or a family.
Whole is greater than the sum of its parts, people specifically. All I have is my experience and my intention to do the next thing. If athletes at the top of their game have a half a dozen coaches, nutrition, then why would you not think that would be an advantageous thing to do?
You can't love a person for their potential. You have to love them where they are now. Right?
Yes. I wish I was introduced to the idea of a rabbi, a mentor, a coach.
Welcome to CEOs Unscripted, the podcast where real talk drives real growth and delivers real results for mid-market leaders like you. I'm your host, Jane Gentry, and each week we're pulling back the curtain on the unfiltered stories of CEOs, founders, and executives who face the highs and lows and everything in between. After 20 years of consulting in enterprise and then experiencing firsthand the reality of being a CEO in a mid-sized company, I discovered why they say it's loneliest at the top. For most mid-market CEOs, there's no handbook. You learn through trial and error or by reaching outside your organization for help. That's exactly why I created CEOs Unscripted, a bi-weekly podcast by mid-market CEOs for mid-market CEOs. Each episode offers an unfiltered, behind-the-scenes look at the wins, the losses, and the playbooks shared by CEOs and founders who've been where you are. No fluff, no jargon, just unscripted, honest conversations about what it takes to lead, grow, and scale in today's business landscape. If you're ready for candid conversations, real-world insights, and lessons from leaders who've walked the path, you're in the right place. So grab a seat at the table because it's time to get real. This is CEOs Unscripted.
Welcome to CEOs Unscripted. Today I have Michael McMahon with Hill & Partners out of Boston. Hi, Michael.
Hi, how are you today?
So good. Michael runs, that sounds so low tech. Michael is the CEO of an exhibit house. Tell everybody what an exhibit house does, Michael.
So an exhibit house is an organization that works with brand companies to bring them to the market. So we're really in the B2B space. So if you imagine a B2B brand has to move about the country, move about the world, and connect with their customers, our organization designs, builds, maintains, and manages properties for those companies in a way that allows them to stick to their high value activity while we move about the planet.
Love it. Okay, so here's how we start here. I want to hear your backstory, and I tell everybody every time we record this, I don't want to know what I can see on LinkedIn. Give us the good stuff. Right.
So I guess it's both interesting and not interesting. I'm essentially, I went to school in Massachusetts, grade school, graduated, went off to be an engineer. And this was in the very early 80s because people said it was the job you should be attempting to master. I had a math aptitude. I was interested in being sort of a champion of my own life. So very excited about that. Found out pretty quickly that I maybe didn't have the education or the credential seeking chops that most people have. So 2 years into my college experience, I actually dropped out, completed a 2-year associate degree in business, and immerse myself in the restaurant industry. My intention when I was in the restaurant industry was to own a restaurant. I don't come from a family that has restaurants. It just seemed like an interesting goal. I can cook, but I love the idea of all kinds of people working together. Looking back, it's easy for me to shape it now because I've lived my life. At the time, I was just pursuing what interests me. So I got a job for a company called TGI Fridays, sort of an old franchise. At that time, they were kind of a scratch cook kitchen.
Still exists, though. I think, doesn't it?
Yeah, no, I think they have a commissary, and I think it's gone a little Cisco, personally, but that's just my opinion.
Okay.
I got on a corporate training team for them in the Southeast, down in the Carolinas. So I had the opportunity to open a few restaurants with them and sort of experience that professional training atmosphere where there were a lot of materials, a lot of communication, and also human support to learn things. Again, credentialism has never been a real interest of mine. So mastering something to get a ribbon never really drove me. It was the people and the experience that I liked the most.
Mm-hmm.
So I went through their system and basically learned just about every position in the company without being a manager, and also not waiting tables. For some reason, I didn't want to wait tables. I completed my period of time at Fridays after 3 or 4 years. I was a head bartender in the 80s when drinking was a big business, happy hours, that sort of stuff. And without really knowing, I had really honed my my bonding and rapport skills. I think they were relatively natural, but I loved engaging with people in an informal environment. And because I'm not a person who can really construct myself to show up in different ways in different places, I just took that with me everywhere I went. In other words, I treated every engagement as just me and another person. 2 customers at TGI Fridays. One was in the food business, one was in the beer business. We decided to open a restaurant. So in I think it was 1985, we opened up a restaurant called Fifth Street Cafe and Gallery. So local artwork, 2-story old brick building. And we went on that partnership venture for about 24 months before I left. I learned an awful lot there too. So in that journey, I learned the difference between having and doing, because I was around people who had felt they arrived in restaurant ownership, and I still was a person who wanted to do the work, right? I wanted, so I saw every day as an opportunity to fail or an opportunity to succeed. I never really got to a point where I felt like I arrived. So that never feeling like it's good enough has driven my entire life. And it's not a feeling of being less than, it's just being very aware that each day you're earning the day. In that process, I realized the partnership wasn't the right thing. I went on to be a GM of another restaurant for a private owner. Learned a few more things. A couple of years later, I decided to sort of blow it all up. And I returned to Massachusetts. And in that process, I got a job with an old friend working in the trade show and event space as a show manager. In the show management role, it was mostly at cities and in venues where we flew in, we walked around, we herded cats, but it was in this professional brand space. It was spectacular. So in the trade show and event management role, what I learned is that the same sort of challenge that I got in the restaurant business, which is you sort of took inventory at the end of the day, right? And then you fixed the things you did wrong. You modified the needs for the next day based on what you learned. And then you did it again. In the trade show and event space, it's the same thing, but the time period's longer, right? So the project is a period of time versus a day. And in that process, I found that I loved that I got all of the different phases of managing something that was much, much, much larger. And I sort of fell in love with it. I loved all of the stress to have, the idea of a product manager, a marketing manager, a VP, a salesperson showing up in San Francisco and walking into this exhibit, which is this mini architecture in the middle of the floor. That's the intention is to be a clear representation of their brand. And then they all have to vie for their own success in their role in this place that's, essentially temporary. And to watch the different stresses, to understand and sort of see the music that's played, the music of people all trying to get what they need. It was just easy for me. It was easy for me to see the forest. The challenge for me was, how do I deal with all these trees, right? And so I did that for years. And then there was a sort of a turning point in that situation. Kind of had to move on from a family. It was a family company. They gave me an opportunity to look for another job because they were selling. So it was a liquidity event for them. And I walked into a local company up here in Massachusetts to just see if I could get on that fabrication side. And walked in the building, actually met my future partner. She interviewed me. This is you can edit this out, but a very timely and interesting thing. At the time, she said, "You know why we like you?" And I said, "Why?" And she said, "Because you can't have a baby." And the reason was, she was a very high performing salesperson. She had 3 really amazing women on her team, and they all had just gone through their first pregnancy. And she, Susan was quite an achiever. So that put a dent in things. Right. So, yeah. So I remember just telling her, in a perfect world, you can't really say that, but I get it. And took a tour of that building, and all the people that I admire in life, all kinds existed in that company. And I saw the possibility of being able to work with all of them, from someone who works on the loading dock to designers, model builders. The accounting people were accounting people, but there were like 15 of them.
Yeah.
I left, went home and talked to my wife and said, I don't know if I'm going to get hired, but I'll work in that building within 30 days. So I'd met enough people in the building that I would have just walked back in there and said, where do I start? And that was really the beginning of all this. So it's a long story to the beginning of an entirely new chapter. I'm 33 years old. Actually, the time I was 31. At 33, Susan asked me to go into business with her outside of that environment. She was 12 years my senior, a little bit of a midlife crisis, I would say. She saw big business coming into this space and roll-ups and that sort of stuff. And she kind of wanted to be her own entity, finding a way. So we went into business together, and she was, for all intents and purposes, we used to call this, I was her work husband. She was my work wife.
And work husbands.
Yeah. And in 1995, we hung a shingle, and I think she thought I was going to be, I had an equity position. It was very, very small. It was a percentage of nothing, right? Because we just opened a company. I think she saw me as someone would have an equity position, but she really saw me as a doer. I flew all over the world. I did all those things. Gradually overnight, we found out that I was more interested in the business, and she was really interested in getting business. Right? She was just a wonderful salesperson. She could turn it on, turn it off, common ground. She was just really, it took me a while to realize how amazing she was. Right. And then after about 8 or 9 years, a couple of years in a row, I tried to orchestrate an opportunity for her to either make a decision where she wanted to be, 12 years my senior, or I was going to have to go do this again.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason why I'm sharing this is I had a plan in my life. The plan was lead or get out of the way. I had no problem leading. I was my high school's the most unlikely high school class president. I was captain of the soccer team. I was all those things, but not in the same way that achievers are. A lot of people that want to be in that role, it was pushed upon me. You know what I mean? I was told, and I think it was because I really liked, I could engage with all kinds of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
that's how I ended up the jury foreman.
Is that how? Yeah. Yeah.
I think so. Because I didn't vie for that. I was just sitting in my chair quietly, I thought.
Well, actually, I know. See, I'm sort of comfortable with the person you are just from a distance, from the bleachers. Is first and foremost, you actually intellectually, how important eye contact is. But I think also naturally, or either maybe you've learned it, but you're also very natural at it. So I can imagine you going in the room and then there'd be a bunch of people who feel as though they matter when you're looking at them, right? I think I have the capacity to do that, but it's not, it's more I have to have the engagement. I have to be interested. I have to ask questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So your partner left and here we are.
Yeah. So in 2000, I made her an offer in 2005. Basically, it was an interesting thing. And I think why I think this is interesting for business people is there is no path that is laid out for you. There are just lots of paths that you could choose. And then sometimes the path that you're least skilled to do, you might execute better because you've got to be on your game, if that makes sense. So for me, the acquiring this business is I have two little kids. I have no money. All I have is my experience and my intention to do the next thing. And here I am with someone who is ready to end this chapter, right? She's done. And she kept on wanting me to tell her what I wanted to do. And I was like, no, this is how it works. You're the principal. I'm the minority shareholder. You need to tell me what you'd like to do. And then I get to sign up for it or not.
Yeah.
And she had a very difficult time with that. And because in my CEO forum nowadays, I see my peers going, I just wish someone would say this, or I just wish someone would take the reins. And the thing is, you've got to invite them to take the reins, and you've got to say that I think you have to look at another human being and say there's no right or wrong. Let's just play with this. What happened is she really couldn't come up with something. So I'm there like, do you want to live in an island? Do you want to be a remote business owner? Would you like, if she had said she wanted to be a remote business owner, Jane, I would have said yes. And I would have built what I've built and someone else would have owned it. And so I'm so grateful that she was like, all of a sudden I can be out of here by December. And it was like June.
I love I love what you said, like there is no path. I've said to people that work with me in the past, part of our strategy is to look for the doors that God opens and then try to have the courage to walk through the door. And that seems like that seems to lack a lot of intellectual rigor.
Yeah.
But it has worked out.
Yeah, I would say, it's tough because I'm 62 years old and I believe I have things to say, right? But then in this world of everybody saying things, you start to say, are these my words or someone else's, right? So, and there's really no place to just be echoing the thoughts and ideas and words of others unless you can attribute them to them, in my opinion. I have a horrible memory, so it's very hard for me to say, like, if you said something brilliant to me, I'd really have to work to say that if I share this with someone else, I got to make sure I give Jane credit, and I don't even trust my brain to do that, right?
But do you think it would come out exactly the same? Because I think I read a lot, I talk to a lot of people, and honestly, I don't think I've had an original thought ever, Michael, but I think it's these ideas that come from all of the places that I insert myself and my brain exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then they all mush around and kind of are curated in a way that when they come out, they're not exactly the same. They also have my experience filtered through them and my point of view.
Right.
So,
well, you just said part B of that. So thinking that on one hand, and then a speaker came to one of our events a few years back. He wrote a book called The Creative Curve. I don't know if you were at that event, but he had researched the creative process, and he came to the conclusion that creative people, not just artists, creative business people, consume in excess of 5 hours of information a day in the area of interest that they're attracted to. So for someone like me, it's business people, it's leadership. And then what he concluded was that becomes the raw material from which you create your next thing. So that's what you just articulated is.
Yeah.
So
I think that's what I do for a living, is to curate the amazing ideas of other people into a way that is relevant to a particular client.
Yeah.
And that's really how I see my role.
Yeah. And I'm playing around with that internally. So, my intention now is to maintain a relatively flat organization, but the executive team that, is directly, I'd like to say, sit around the table with me, because they do. But in the hierarchy of things, I am owner, CEO, and president, is how do I share with them, how I see the world and situations and engagements, and then invite them to speak it back to me in language that suits them. And then ultimately what we'd like to do is have a shared way we communicate about, our mission and vision and what we believe in. But it needs to be true and genuine, right? It really needs, we have authenticity, as a core competency here. Core value, and it's be true to yourself and genuine. And I really think that is like, speak the words as if they're yours.
Yeah. So one of the things I hear from CEOs, and I experienced it, by the way, you might have that intention, but when you are in the room, no matter how much you want to get this input from people and this feedback, the fact that you are sitting in the room with that authority and that title makes it difficult for people to really be authentic in that moment. How do you encourage people to do that, or how do you get around that?
Well, this is my father always used to say, you got to do the time. I think this is the tough thing of business. I love small business because I think it's centered on being human and, human beings. I think as what we produce or contribute in the marketplace becomes a thing that, people work in systems on that thing, you have to build in layers, you have to build in tools and systems to manage it to some level of predictability, right? And in that process, we try to do this efficient leadership, this thing where there's lots of clarity and, and you cull things down, and there's punishment and reward. And when I say punishment and reward, punishment could be disappointment. There's lots of different things. I don't know if I have the brain power to do that in larger and more robust organizations. But how I do it here is I do the time. Like, I spend with my greatest loyalty used to be to every human being in my company to the same, level of attention. Now my loyalty is to these 5 people that run this organization that will literally be the energy that creates the next best work that this organization does. So my intention is to connect with them as a business leader, as a person who's pursuing this work, And you just have to do a lot of time there because each person is accepting, risking, or attempting their version of leadership, this hybrid leadership management thing. And you kind of have to meet them where they are. And what I've learned is I can't set the clock on that in any type of time frame that I'm used to. If you and I talk about something today that we're going to do, I'm looking for action to be taken right away.
Yeah.
Like, did you write it down?
Yeah.
What are you doing tomorrow? Most people are rolling it into their month. It's incredible. And I have to, my feeling is I have to respect the process people, the steady relation people. A lot of people that are in my role, we are just, we are our greatest asset and our biggest challenge when you systematize an organization, right?
Tell me where, because I've just had this experience with somebody. Tell me where you think you're the biggest challenge as you systematize an organization.
I'm a very passionate person. I can do a lot of things pretty well. I can do a ton of things marginally. Really. And there's a book, The ADHD Entrepreneur. I was never diagnosed, but there's a whole family of people in my head. I haven't named them, but it's not a personality thing. But if we're talking about accountability, I can be that person. If we're talking about risk, I can be that person. If we want to just try something and there's not much to stand on, hey, let's give it a shot. If we want to have structure, let's talk about the structure. Let's talk about when it goes well, when it goes bad. What's the, I say, who's the hammer? You know what I mean? And I don't care if your hammer's covered with pink fur or if it's a gavel. I just need to know what is the consequence that you put forth if you're asking for something. So my greatest asset is I'm willing to talk about all of those things, all of those possibilities. Where it becomes the biggest problem is people like structure, process, timing. People want to know what does success look like for me in this role. And in leadership and management, that hybrid thing, you're managing people, but you also have to give them space. The outcome isn't usually constructed from a number of steps. Or maybe the steps are there, but the level of achievement isn't that, it's not like this.
Right.
So it's a little ontological. I remember there's a trophy out in our lobby, Jane, and it's a Falcon Trophy. It's something we sort of award people for excellence here. And it's not on a time frame. Sometimes it can go 6 months and there's no Falcon Award. But on the coin that's attached to it, it says conceive, believe, achieve, which is the mantra I lived my life by until I decided you need to take the pattern out of that. It's like you can go right to achievement and the rest will take care of itself. You know what I mean? If the achievement's up here, like if I walked in a room and I wanted to meet you, the linear person is going to go, well, I'll see who she talks to. Then I'll ask them a little bit about her, and I'll orchestrate my way to meet this person. No, I'd like to meet this person. I want to be respectful. I'll look for my spot. And then whatever happens, happens. It could be like, I don't talk to people that are over 6 feet tall or whatever, whatever rule someone has.
Yeah. So when I said, I've been having this conversation with a client that's in a growth phase. Yeah. And I said, first off, we got to get to the root problems of what's causing the pain right now.
Right.
Let's not put Band-Aids on symptoms. But part of it is, as you grow, a lot of times the CEO becomes what I call the decision bottleneck.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You have to be involved in way too many things. And so what I heard you say a moment ago is you are empowering those 5 people that are basically running your company
Yeah.
to lead. How do you get yourself out of the way to improve what I call time to decision, right?
Yeah.
Because if we take too long to make decisions, we miss opportunities.
Yeah, it's a great question. And all right, so I've built a couple of tools around this. So when I'm talking to people, so I 100% agree with you, is if you get in the way of everything that you want, then if you start to realize that, then you go, wow, that's the thing I'm in control of. And I've tried this. The first phase of this was probably around, we come out of COVID. I want to build the organization, but I don't want to go back to doing start over. So we're going to build the organization and really put this void between me and the work we do, and work to have these people who aspire to fill it. And then the unfortunate thing is I found out that all of my effort to give them that space was actually conditional. I thought it was sort of unconditional. These people, I admire them. They are capable, but no condition, so the space was there. What I realized is I was that person who was advising from a place of knowing in an area that was entirely new. It isn't me making those decisions. Is it? So you start to have to go, well, I started to learn, this took me like 16, 17 months to say that it's on you guys, while my total body energy was, no, it isn't. Right. So it's on you. So I'd come in, and then I would be in a point of frustration, as if they disappointed me. Like, why aren't you doing it this way? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So let me ask you, because you're a self-reflective person, so I think you'll be honest with this hard question.
Yeah.
I have a client who he brought in a CEO, a president, to run his company. So he had one guy for your 5 guys, right? Or 5 people. And the relationship just broke recently. And so I was talking to the president. I said, can I tell you that this is something I see more often than I would like, which is a leader, a CEO brings in somebody to run, and I'm making air quotes here, the company, right?
Yeah.
And you're accountable to the budget. You're accountable to the outcomes and the strategy. Mm-hmm. And yet these CEOs have what I call, they are grenade launchers. Okay. Yeah. So I say to him, so what happens is the CEO is still out in the world, right? Because he or she is driving the vision of the company, but they have shiny object syndrome. So they see this new thing and they go, hey, we have to do this. And they launch that grenade right into the budget, right into the strategy. And yet that president is still accountable to the outcomes.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy.
How do you avoid that, Michael?
Well, first and foremost, I think you need to have a set of words and phrases that you both agree on their meaning. Because what I do, so I talk about tossing grenades. We have brand clients who throw grenades over the fence all the time and completely disrupt some very clear communication that they've sent our way. So they've that's the nice thing about being in a B2B space, is your clients are teaching you all the time. Yeah. And then if you don't like what you're seeing, I think a leader in his own organization says, well, we shouldn't do that. Like, we shouldn't do that to our own people or our partners. In other words, if it doesn't feel good to us, it can't possibly feel good if we do. And yet so many companies adopt behavior that isn't effective. So what I do now, so it was months and months and months. What I do more often than not, I actually stop and say, how am I occurring right now? Am I occurring as frustrated, angry, bossy? And most of the time they work for you, so they're going to be kind. Right. But at least I'm suggesting that they have an opportunity. And then I'll say, this heightened energy is not anger. It's not frustration. It's heightened energy because that's how I am when I get excited. I'm excited. So then I ask them, I can do that from this position back here, if you'd like. We play around with it. Now, I've known these people all for a decade, right? So at least a decade. So I do that. And I use the words you and you guys as a team and this stuff that you're working to build, this future that you guys are working on. I don't use I just don't use it. And if I use it and I hear myself, I'm like, by the way, that's my ego talking. So if you guys say I much, just know it's a big part of how we get where we want to go, but it doesn't have to lead the way. Right.
Yeah.
So I know this sounds really fuzzy, but this kind of stuff is personal. When you're making $1 million decisions as a team and you're pursuing things and they affect people's livelihood and we activate a lot of teams. I believe it's very important to see how we are showing up in a room. And I'm the first person to say that I'm the slowest learner in this space. It's taken me 30 years to get here. I'd like to see you guys get there in 2, 3, 5 years.
Yeah.
And how do we do that?
Yep. I like the intentionality of that. I think I've said this on the podcast before, which is I had a boss at one point who I thought did not pay attention to the impact that he had on people's lives. And I called him out on it. And he said, Jane, all I can do is be myself. And I said, no, not good enough.
Yeah.
That's not good enough. You have to be intentional in the way that you lead. And you have to realize that every move you make has a material impact on a person or a family affiliated with this company. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was just kind of the laziest form of leadership I had ever heard. Yeah. And that's not to say don't be authentic. I do want you to be yourself. I just don't want you to be the laziest version of yourself. I
so agree. You can, at any given moment, we can be the next best version of us. And we either can look at our surroundings and look for the cues, or, by the way, you could be entrepreneurial in that and say that, if I were to look in the mirror, maybe I should comb my hair. You know what I mean? I mean, there's that, because some people, I think they get, actually, this is being taught to a lot of young people, and we're moving away from it, is to be true to yourself and genuine or authentic is some picture you have of, one version of yourself, and you think it's unique. I would say if you had to go out and look for it elsewhere, it's not unique. You're joining some club, right? But that true to yourself and genuine is like, what is my heart telling me? And I know I'm speaking to you, so it'd be like there's a power greater than us, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not intellectual, right? I mean, you can intellectualize it. So, what is this saying? And am I true to myself and genuine? And that's really difficult in the workplace. I can't imagine organizations where they inherit senior members of their team, and I'm sure you work with a lot of those. And there's the risk management there when someone's in a career is they need they need opposition research on everybody that joins the team. And then there's some way they're handling them because righteously, the world has told them that's what they have to do. It's why I would never excel in those positions in a large organization, because I don't like to be handled. So therefore, I don't like to handle people. That's
why we do. We have a relatively new AI-powered platform that we've invested in to do what I say, increase time to diagnosis, right? So it doesn't take 3 months to figure out where we need to be working in a client organization. But two of the pieces of that are what we call an identity assessment, a corporate identity assessment. Uh-huh. So do all the people see the organization's identity the same way? Right? That's awesome. You see immediately where there's misalignment. And because decisions are going to get bottlenecked again, because people don't see the way we make decisions the same way. And the second one is a change assessment. Where specifically in the organization and I mean down to the name of the person, where are we going to see resistance to change?
Yes.
And and I think that helps with some of those things that you're talking about, right? You can come up with the best strategy on earth.
Mm-hmm.
But if your leadership team is not aligned around how we make decisions against that strategy, and some of those people are really resistant to change, it doesn't matter the brilliance of your strategy. It will never get executed on.
So true. So true. I believe, I'm a little bit of a SEAL Team 6 kind of guy, and I never served our country. But the idea that there's only so many people that you can have in your finite tribe, that you can move and inspire and also see and react to. Yeah. So I 100% believe what you're saying. And I've also had that challenge. So ego again, I used to think that if I shared my personal mission and vision around working with other people, that I literally could be the answer to any human being who comes through the door, help them be successful. I mean, I honestly believe that I could create successful people. Give me you're tired, you're weak, you're angry, or whatever, right? And so I loved helping people. I liked, I'd pave this road. I'd send them off on the trail in this place. My intentions were true and genuine for me, but incredibly misguided. Right?
To go back to what you said earlier, and I think I've said this to you in other conversations, you can't love a person for their potential. You have to love them where they are now, right?
Yes.
So you are like seeing the potential of people and seeing them in their future selves that they may or may not even want to live.
Yeah. Now, yes. And now I'm in this role where this is the wonderful thing about actually living into this sort of CEO role. So I'm CEO and president, but I really have a collective presidency and 5 VPs, and I get to play in that room. But the CEO role is, mission, vision, where are we going, sort of resources, that sort of things, and really bouncing back and forth. But I always use the term from the bleachers. So I'll walk up to anybody and I'll go, from the bleachers, this is what this looks like. And what I believe the message is saying is, I know I'm over here. I know I don't know all the circumstances, but this is what I see. And a lot of times now I'm erring more on their behavior and their engagement as leaders versus me suggesting that, from the bleachers, this graphic designer looks like they're taking advantage of you. I don't do that.
Right.
I'll say from the bleachers, it looks like when I look at you and your team, it's very clear who you advocate for. I can see the touches. I can see the energy. Is there anybody that you don't advocate for? And then I use the term, we go, should we do the NFL draft, which is, should we sit in a room and place your team in a hierarchy? And then let's talk about those bottom 2. Are they, and we use the term, the 5s and 6s in life, can we make them a 7 or an 8? Like with our effort and energy. And it's all what you're talking about. It's this, you can only have so many projects.
Yes.
And you also can't have a team of aces unless you're prepared to herd them, right? Because, in my opinion.
No, I agree with that. And I'm trying to remember what I've read recently that supports that with some data. It's too many. I said to you in our earlier conversation, a lot of chiefs, not a lot of Indians.
Yeah.
Right. And the tribe needs chiefs and Indians both.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and haven't you found with high achievers, I think high achievers will be successful anywhere they go. So, giving them ultimatums to me is not a way to modify any behavior that may not be in line with where we're going. So I do a lot with people with achievers. I go like, I need you to communicate what you see and what you're wanting to accomplish. And then I can work with how they communicate that. And then I can say from the bleachers, that's not how it's occurring at all. From me. And then I go like, I'm just a guy. And we all know I'm not just a guy, but I try to use language so that I can crack through that outer shell, that knowing shell, and maybe have people make, slight course corrections. And then I also like to highlight their talents. I go, I know you're a very talented person, but this is a skill set that I think you have that I admire. You know what I mean? So if someone has the ability to perseverate over an email and then generate words that move, like move people, if I can find the written word for other people, I just go like, how long did it take you to get here?
Now, I think that's an important role. And when we talk about inspirational leadership, and I know you've seen me talk about that and talk about how important affirmation is to people, and that almost everybody I've ever met who's been successful has had a person in their past who saw something in them they didn't see in themselves, and encouraged that attribute or whatever that is. And I think that's critical. And I hate that we have been talking for 45 minutes and didn't get to a bunch of stuff we wanted to talk to. But what I usually do here is do a little rapid fire. Are you up for it?
Sure.
Okay. So what one thing, Michael, did you learn early in your career that impacted your success?
The whole is greater than the sum of its parts. People specifically.
Okay. How does that manifest?
I learned that if I could get people on the same page to do something, I would find myself like joyously reflecting on a period of time. And I would say to those people, do you realize that if any one of us took this on, like we're still grinding at it. Like we're so far from being done. And I just think the idea of a well-motivated team heading in the same direction, it's why everything is tribal here. Everything is a discussion. We call it the thing that leads to the thing.
I agree. And that's why we look for that misalignment, right?
Yeah.
That's the thing that will screw that up.
Yeah.
What one thing do you hope young people will learn in business?
Well, I said my father used to say it, you got to do the time. I'm a big proponent of if you've earned it in life, communicate that to me. If you've earned it in life and then so go your path. But I believe young people, they need to collide with other people that have different ideas, different thoughts, different processes. I think the real learning comes in between those times when people are either teaching or being taught. It's in that, it's the dark matter of, life. And, it's that space no one sees. It's why like collision and engagement, we're in the experience, an experiential economy. So I would like more young people to do the time in an office, in an environment where they're colliding with people, a little less efficiency and purpose sometimes can really allow an individual to make strides.
I love it. They say the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The next best time is now.
Yeah.
Is there anything you wish you'd have done 20 years ago that you do now?
I wish I was, so this is what I wish, and it's interesting because of the role that you play. I wish I was introduced to the idea of a rabbi, a mentor, a coach.
I'm a rabbi?
Yeah, well, my dad used to say everybody needs a rabbi, and we're Catholic. But someone who either is an advocate for where you are and is open to sort of letting you imagine where you could go, and then with an occasional judgment here and there, like, bring you in. Because once I started getting coaching and or feedback loop training, my CEO forum, so much amazing occurred in my life.
Yeah.
So much abundance came. So that would be another young people thing. If athletes at the top of their game have a half a dozen coaches, nutrition, then why would you not think that would be an advantageous thing to do, is to have people in your life who are helping you reflect on your progress and maybe helping you see and achieve some of your goals.
I think about it like a guy I've met, Seth Mikowski, who's a mindset coach for professional athletes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And your CEO forum is your mindset, right? And it's not because people are judging you in particularly, but they're asking you questions and they're forcing you to reflect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. What are you reading right now, or who are you following?
Oh,
Because I know you're doing that.
No, yeah, I go in and out, but Maxwell has a brand new revision to his leadership book so I read that 25 years ago. I'm reading it now. It's actually giving me some insight on how I might be able to find my team find themselves in a leadership matrix, because he's got like 20 different leadership I'll say identities or skill sets. So really, instead of working on leadership, someone can go like, wow, I'm a natural leader in these categories or these spaces. Boy, but I really would be better if I worked on this sort of leadership. So I love the way that book is structured right now. I wish I knew the title to tell you. It's his 25th anniversary. It's like 30 or 40% new stuff. And it's one of those things, leadership stories plus actual stories of business owners or entities or brands.
Yeah.
I love that kind of stuff.
Anything else?
No, I wouldn't say there's, this is where I am now. I would have to, if I had known, I would I take a picture of every book I read, and I have little, snippets. I call them jewels that come from those books. And if I get a lot of jewels from them, I share it. I don't share the jewels. I just say, you got to, maybe you should read this book. But nothing else at the moment.
What do you do when you're stuck, Michael?
Well, I learned by hearing myself talk. I'm one of those people. It can be painful. So when I'm stuck, I actually voice it. And then I learned way back when I was a personal power, Tony Robbins guy. And, that was a significant.
I've done the fire walk.
Yeah. Oh, you have. There you go.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I learned a little jewel from him, and I use this when I'm stuck, is ask your brain good questions. I use the term good. In other words, I would never say, why am I stuck? Because it'll tell me. Mm-hmm. I do a little more so how long is this going to take to find the next thing? I'll say something like, what do I have to do to take action? I'll ask myself questions, and then my head will go right towards it. The solutions are unique to each person. Does that make sense? So for me to work on something, sometimes I just have to get my head out of it. That means I have to go to lunch with someone.
Yeah.
And not even talk about that subject.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I'm actually
I've been prompting AI on some of that stuff.
Oh, that'd be
so
great.
You're your own personal AI, but I've been playing around a lot in AI for to see what would be beneficial to my clients. And so I've been asking AI some of those things, and it's so fascinating. Is there anything that I didn't ask you about that you wish I had?
No, but this is, I sort of respond to what comes around me. This concept of AI. One of the things that I'm very excited about, and I'd rather have someone show me an example, but I've heard in a lot of circles the concept of an AI colleague. In other words, creating an AI persona, so that you could essentially be exploring an idea, but you could communicate that idea to an AI but they come at you from
with their buddy.
What?
You make your own AI buddy.
Yeah. And
cool.
and there's a possibility to me. I think there's a possibility if I was starting my business today, I could build an AI buddy that is a well-trained CPA, financial person turned business person that has started X amount of companies under a certain gross revenue, build that thing and then queue that for questions. And then over here, I could have another AI colleague that I've built. And imagine that. You could do that at a fraction of the cost.
Cool. Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah. Thank you so much, Michael. It's
been a pleasure
talking with you. And I look forward to sharing this with people.
All right. Well.
And I hope you'll come back someday.
Oh, been a pleasure. And I love this idea.
Thank you.
That's a wrap for this episode of CEOs Unscripted, where real talk fuels real growth. I hope today's conversation gave you fresh insights and inspiration for your own leadership journey. If you love this episode, be sure to subscribe so you never miss a candid conversation with a trailblazing leader. Until next time, keep leading with intention, growing with grit, and driving for results. I'm Jane Gentry, and this is CEOs Unscripted. See you next time.